All right. Welcome back to the Performance Podcast, or Playbook more so, which is the podcast. And I have a fantastic guest today, Jack Linderman, who I want to give a preface to first is we met climbing, and now he is helping me produce we'll call it a short documentary, short film on my Tokyo 2020 experience. So keep your eyes and ears open for that. I'm very excited. Jack, how you doing?
I'm doing just dandy. I'm excited to be here. Excited to share and garner some wisdom from you. And yeah,
Let's
ready to
go.
rock and roll, man.
Yeah, I think it's kind of cool to kind of even bring up how we first met, which was
Yeah.
kind of unexpected. I, as some people have recognized now, started my climbing journey. And in the last podcast, David Coulter and I really talked about this a lot, which was finding some form of cross training to benefit you within your main sport. But funny enough, and I actually wanted to tap on this before we talked about all the filmmaking and stuff like that is actually how have you found climbing to kind of benefit you? Has it just been a good release of tension, and it's good to just do something else, or is it kind of like athletics to where this kind of feels like it's benefiting your filmmaking?
Yeah. I mean, to preface, I was like a semi athlete going up through high school.
Mm,
Did track. I was a runner. And then got
okay.
into weightlifting for a bit, to eventually fill out my 6'2" lanky frame, just a bit. I was like, okay, I'm gonna bulk. I'm gonna be Ronnie Coleman. Gonna be Arnold Schwarzenegger. Those were the
Yeah.
goals. So I was big into like weightlifting for quite some time, and senior year for high school rolls around, and that was when COVID started for me. So I
Mm,
started doing a lot of calisthenics work like in our garage, and when things opened back up, my friends and I started going climbing at a place in Carmel. I can't even remember what it's called at this point, but then
mm,
eventually transitioned to North Mass Boulder, and that was such a great break in the routine from just lifting the same weights, doing the same things, and always having like new challenges and like mental things to figure out in climbing, because it's more than just your grip strength and your forearm strength. It's a mental challenge of figuring out routes and pushing past what you thought you could do. Because with lifting, it's really easy to grind out another rep, and it can be ugly. But trying to grind out a problem on a wall feels a lot different. It's a lot more mental fortitude, because if you slip, it can actually be painful. And usually if you're gonna grind out like a bench press, you have a spotter there to lift it off you. So climbing for me has been super beneficial, not only just lifting heavy filmmaking equipment, but in terms of like mental flexibility and mental fortitude of being able
mm.
to approach creative challenges like it's a problem on the wall, trying to figure out your route through. It might be different than other people's, um, but getting creative with your direction from the base of that wall to the top has definitely been super super beneficial for me.
Yeah, I think and I was trying to find the connections, and again, like, you are the professional here when it comes to filmmaking, and I was trying to maybe see or create a connection between climbing and filmmaking on the mental side. And I feel like that's primarily what I actually end up touching upon in at least a lot of these past podcasts was, most of these sports athletically, when you're looking at the top of the top, not when you're first beginning, but when you're at the highest point of athletics, it ends up becoming just about, if not 100% mental. And, in my mind, right, like you are at such a high level now for filmmaking, right, that maybe you're starting to recognize that there is a piece. I don't know if it's, the mentality or, the creativity that you walk into it, but again, that's how I started connecting things was being able to have some form of cross training benefited and played into your actual sport. And so I was assuming like, all right, well, is it kind of like a chess game? Like while you're climbing, it's forcing you to be more creative with, well, how do I move within this frame of 6'2"? And so it forces you to be creative. Does that like, do you feel like there's been any transfer creativity, like the creativity side? in filmmaking with utilizing climbing?
Yeah, I mean, I was extremely like regularly climbing when I first moved to Indy, so that was last April. And although I don't go as much as I wish I could at the moment, that time when I moved here and was trying to kind of get my career off the ground, and every new client is a brand new problem. I have a physical reference of climbing to look back to and relay on,
Mm,
where you have to look at a wall and you got to get creative. My kind of routine going into North Mass is, okay, let's just knock out all of these real quick to get ourselves warmed up, and just gonna throw something at the wall and see what sticks,
mm,
and see which ones I can knock out real quick, and see where I hit some bumps and where problems arise. And I think a lot of that kind of mentality of, okay, we're just going to get something out there, see what sticks, and then refine, as something that definitely, on the creative side, hits with filmmaking too. I think good is better than, or done is better than perfect,
mm,
and that definitely applies with filmmaking. It's like, get something out there, and then I go back to refine and work out those kinks. And the same thing on a wall, trying to go from a blue to a purple. It's like, okay, there'll be a few that will stick, but if I keep working at it and get creative and flex my brain muscles a little bit, I can find a way through. And
yeah,
so there have been shoots like that where it's like, I don't know the way through, but if I'm able to, get some warmed up under my belt, knock out a few easy problems, and then move on to the big one, that sort of routine definitely transfers from climbing over to filmmaking.
yeah. I've been able to watch that too, which was kind of exciting for me because, again, it's like I was a novice. I was kind of thinking about filmmaking, but it wasn't like, a true passion of mine. And then I got to watch you work within the film that we've been creating. And, it was just exciting for me to see. And now that we're connecting it, I kind of felt like you were climbing, right? Like, we were trying for different locations within the pool that we were doing the interview, right? And
Hmm.
so I actually thought it was super interesting that you were touching upon all of these different spots and filling out these different angles, similar to maybe you filling out a specific hold on the wall. And it was, I don't know, I feel like when I got to a shoot, I would sit there and go, yeah, I like this angle, done.
Right,
But
right,
like
right.
to see you kind of flow through it and like really watch you think through every little scenario. Well, what about this lighting? Well, let's try this. Give me another chance. Let's throw this on, take this out. And I got to watch that process. And I guess it now in my mind, I'm starting to see that like mental connection of you just like working through a crux. Oh, well, this little part that you didn't like, it's kind of hard, but and you work through it. Has there been a specific shoot that maybe you've done that the most, where you've had like this quote unquote crux to work through?
Yeah, and I think that some of the most successful people in business or creatively or whatever are also people that are successful as an athlete or physically. Maybe that's, in sports, or, you just go to the gym and you lift and you climb or whatever, not something you have to do professionally, or in any sort of team element. But if you're able to work your body well, and work through physical challenges, then that absolutely applies to mental challenges. And the biggest example I can think of in recent memory was earlier this year. We took on a job with an agency that ended up being a bit beyond the scope that was initially planned, and became a bit of like a spec project for us. So a spec project means that you invest more of your own time and oftentimes money into a project to make something that becomes a portfolio piece. So this happened earlier this year. It was for a bank, and we did this cool narrative style theater spot. So it was set in an old theater, and trying to figure out how we can make something that looks really high level on essentially no budget, because it was all coming out of my pocket beyond the budget we were given, and bring on an actual crew, and bring in talent and people coordinating wardrobe and all these moving parts with no money and very limited time. I think a lot of those mental gymnastics and that crux happens in the pre-production side, especially for me.
Mm,
On set, to me, is just a flow. There's issues that come up, and you just have to deal with them and keep moving. And if you get stuck in the mud on the day, then, really you're just kind of SOL. Like there's not much you can do. You're wasting people's time and you're wasting money, and so you just have to make a decision and move on with it. But I think the mental gymnastics that happen are often in the pre-production side of things and planning to ensure that the day goes smoothly.
Mm,
So for that shoot, I think we spent probably a month of actual like work time ahead of a 2-day shoot.
mm,
So, in terms of planning locations and the schedule and trying to move these things around so we have enough setup time for this shot, but this one shot doesn't require as much setup time. But then we have the cast waiting here that have makeup and stuff done already, and they're just kind of burning time. We want to be, respectful of their time they're committing. Trying to move these things around and plan stuff out efficiently and effectively is definitely something that parallels with this physical element of sports or athletics.
mm. Yeah. Well, so I think it's interesting too, because so you work through all these hard problems, and I start walking back towards the stress of work, and specifically in a scenario like yours, like you run your own business, and so that can like stack on more stress for people. And I keep walking back to you loved like lifting and like doing some form of bodybuilding and then climbing. um Now when I look at someone that struggles with like a 9 to 5, or people that are kind of continually feeling like they're having this stress kind of just stacked upon them, did you feel like having these different movement practices, let that be bodybuilding, um, and whatever other activities like climbing that you're doing, like was that like the perfect release for you to just like get away from this stress of working and especially owning your own business?
I think for me, getting into the physical side of athletics and working out initially is a release. You have these other stressors that then it becomes fun to go and just lift stuff for an hour. But as that becomes routine and it's now a habit over months or years, that it's more of a character development thing of I think just as a man, like stoicism and maintaining your cool and your calm. Uh, that just because I've put my body through whatever kind of stress, whether that's a super long set of high reps or going through weight that I can only bear for a couple, um, knowing that I can do that with mental fortitude and come out and not feel like shit on the other end. I don't know if I can curse on this podcast or
Yeah,
not.
go ahead, go ahead.
Not feel like shit on the other end. Um, Essentially, that lets problems arise in the work world and still be able to have like a cool, calm, like collected demeanor. And as a business owner, you don't just run yourself; you run other people, and whether or not you have employees, in some way you're working with other people. And so whether that's like contracting crew on set, you are a leader, and so much of the role of leadership extends beyond telling people what to do. It's how you carry yourself and how you handle conflict. And a lot of leaders can handle conflict in an explosive way, and that's just not something that usually goes too well. So
Mm,
if you're able to put yourself through stress physically and still remain calm and collected, some of that stoicism I think does transfer to your skills personally as a leader, and that's probably been the biggest thing in terms of managing stress when it comes to set time.
yeah, that's a really interesting. I've never kind of heard it. I've never heard it explained that way, explosively, how people might handle things, and that's kind of like a beautiful. It's a beautiful way to put it too, because by putting yourself through these physical movements that are incredibly taxing, they're super hard. There is a moment to where you're physically being completely crushed, right? Let's just say it's a back squat, and panicking's not an option, because panicking you crumble, but actually being
Hmm.
able to hold composure is kind of like the perfect way to stabilize not just yourself but the weight. And I guess to your point, it kind of bleeds into work, showing that, okay, well, I have all this weight on me. I have all these people waiting for me, and I'm directing all these people. Being explosive is not going to solve anything. It's just going to let this
Yeah.
weight crumble. So that's actually a really cool way. And I did want to
Well,
jump
there are
into,
two sort of like anecdotes to that. Sorry to cut
please,
you off,
no,
but
please.
to expand on that, there's if you're in the gym, are you the guy that like screams and hits your chest before a set to get amped up,
Yeah.
or do you sit there, collect yourself, and then just do it?
Mm.
And I think those are two different kinds of people, and I hope to be the second of those, not the first.
Yeah.
And in terms of like not panicking, last April, myself and a couple of friends got to take a trip over to Thailand, and at the end of that trip, we all got our scuba diving certification. And during that training, beforehand, they tell you, you are 60 feet or whatever underwater during this training, and at that point, the nitrogen in your body has compressed to a certain point, and if you panic and you freak out and you swim to the top, that nitrogen in your body will decompress, and if you do it too fast, essentially your body will like internally explode, like
Yeah.
it can kill you.
Yeah.
And those first few dives, there were moments where I started panicking, and your heart rate goes up, and you're using more air, and your mouth gets dry, and you're breathing um, through this air tank, and the only way to survive there is to be able to calm yourself down and regulate your emotions and really your nervous system, because you can tell yourself you're fine, but if your heart rate is still going crazy and you're breathing like a maniac, things will still go wrong. And so being able to regulate your emotions and the physical parts of your body is huge when you're working with other people and when you're under some sort of physical stressor like that.
Mm,
So that was absolutely something that taught me a lot about kind of having control and ruling yourself in a high pressure scenario.
for sure. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of going the other way, right? The guy that has to smack himself, listen to a lot of music. It's almost like faulty uh sets of confidence. Like I always fall back on that, and people probably starting to get sick of me saying this, but I fall back on the David Goggins, and he always brings up this point, like, what are you going to do when the headphones come off and like you're on the
Hmm.
field? Like you
Yeah.
can't just be playing music all the time. And so I think there's kind of a beautiful point of like, hey, like you have to learn to be able to compose, but also get yourself riled up without having these external things. And some of them obviously in a gym are flashy. Some guys like slapping himself just to do like 3 plates. You're like, all right, like that's cool, but like, it's just too much. And so I
Yep.
think there is a beauty to, finding that calm for sure.
Totally. No, I agree.
Um, but I do want to jump onto, just because I think it's such an interesting way of how people get into this. But so you've started your own production company, your own business. How was that for you? And like getting into that, because a lot of people struggle getting into business or having ideas on what to do. And so, they usually just go work for someone first, and you might have done that. But based off of the things that you've told me, it kind of sounds like you're just grassroots. You just did it yourself. And I think that's kind of a
Yeah.
beautiful journey.
Yeah, my only other job before starting my production company was working at a pizza shop. And that was for a year in high school. So, I have no other like creative agency experience. I was never a videographer at another company.
Mm,
It was really just on my own will. And that the experience of starting it was mixed because I was in school. So I went to Ball State for telecommunications. And after a lot of tumultuous time of trying to figure out, what I want to do with my life, I was like, oh, maybe I can be a music teacher because I had this big passion for band and music, or maybe I can do computer science because that is stable and pays well and will look really good to my family and all these people surrounding me from my hometown. But I always loved film and video growing up, but never really considered it to be a job or a full time career. The only option in my eyes was like, hey, you go out to Hollywood and you make movies. And it wasn't until that senior year of high school for me that I was like, oh, I'm going to try just making some businesses or some videos for small businesses. And I get to college and just realized that I don't really fit in there. I'm not like getting in a group with anyone. Don't really have any friends outside of a couple friends from high school that also came there with me,
Mm.
and it just didn't feel right. And so I started my production company at the same point that I started school, and was doing a lot of free work. I was just reaching out to everyone and their mother saying, hey, I can do a free video for your business, just to like gain some experience, get some stuff on the website, the portfolio, and hopefully get some word of mouth work. And so there came a point where I was heavily considering, like, what does it look like if I just do this and I just go all in, and I stop worrying about this essay for my creative writing class or this Spanish assignment that I have to do. And I stop thinking about that, and I just think about a business. I think a lot of creative people get into their work, whether you're a videographer, a photographer, whatever, because it's like a creative passion, and then later learn the business of it. But I think what set me up well to start was that I was very interested and invested in looking at it as a business from the very get go. Although I maybe probably got that creative passion part out of the way in high school and before. But from the get go of starting the company, it was, how do I turn this into an actual business?
Mm.
And there came a point, that first semester, where I met with one of the professors, talking about what's been on my mind. I remember in my TCOM 101 class, we had an essay prompt that was like, tell us what you think you're getting out of school so far. Like, how has college been valuable for you? And I remember my essay was like half a page, and I wrote like, I think I'm wasting my time here. And that professor emailed me and was like, hey, like, I understand what you're feeling. Like, she was very sweet about it. But she's like, I understand what you're feeling, and you could reach out to this professor that has done the whole freelance thing out in LA, in like audio work, but the same freelance rules apply. So I went and talked to him, and he shut pretty much the whole thing down. It was like, uh, I would just try to stop getting new work, focus on school, because the industry and the world will eat you alive. And that was just the fuel I needed to drop out. So that's exactly what pushed me over the edge to just go all in. And luckily, some of those free projects that I had done had gotten a little bit of word of mouth exposure, and I was doing some consistent work with a real estate agent, just filming basic listing videos. And really, that was my main source of income, was just real estate listing videos. And by the time that I dropped school, I was making no more than $1,000 a month, which to a college student, whose only other job was a pizza place before that, like, that's pretty good money. It's not like
Yeah.
I have any other expenses. I'm gonna live in a house with 5 other people and pay $200 in rent. So I somehow had the courage to step into that role and drop school.
There's a
So
couple.
yeah,
Oh, sorry. I just want to jump
no,
in
you're good.
because I think there's such a beautiful connection. I don't know if you know about Jim Carrey and his story too much.
No,
Um, it's kind of reminded me about like the conversation that we had after the shoot day, but he talks about his dad all the time, and he was a really good comedian. He was really funny. And I hope I'm not botching the story, but the main lines here, but his dad was too afraid to do something that wasn't quote unquote stable. And so he never did it. And he went into a stable accounting job, and eventually he actually lost his job, right? This stable job was, it had
mm,
the hope and the insight that, oh yeah, like this is just going to be a 9 to 5 and you'll get salary and you'll be good. But he actually ended up losing his job. And Jim Carrey's point was, you can fail at something you don't love too. That's what people don't really think about. And it kind of
right,
reminds me of your story because, he did the opposite of what his dad did and went, no, I'm going to go for this creative pursuit that's not stable. It's not stable at all, but you know, it has the potential to be everything huge.
totally,
But at the same time, it's like, at some point you have to recognize that maybe the money and the stability isn't worth all that it is. And so it starts to remind me of your story. And I don't know if you're interested in talking about it, but your dad and his pursuit was kind of similar to that.
Yeah. And to preface, like, I love my dad very much and respect him greatly. His journey was he went to film school,
Mm.
and his goal, in his words, were to go make shitty horror films out in Hollywood. So he had an internship in Hollywood, and um, his view of filmmaking was very much like, the way through is Hollywood. Like, you have to go make films, and this kind of pseudo marketing agency, like freelancer, videographer, commercial world was pretty foreign to him, just like it was to me when I got started. So he went out to LA with an internship, and um, I don't know in his brain if that was something where he came back and didn't continue to pursue that because of the stability, or the lack thereof, or if it was just something that never panned out. But he to this day is a teacher, which is super funny given that I've abandoned the whole educational system. So, his dream was to be a shitty horror filmmaker, and now he teaches in high school and teaches adjunct colleges online. And the film thing is just kind of a dream that never really happened. And there was a lot of pushback in my initial stages of starting Paragon, when I was talking to my parents about, hey, I think maybe this is the path I want to go down, and I want to quit school. I had school essentially paid for with scholarships, and so to me and to them, it was like I was abandoning a completely like free set out path for me. It was the easy road to go down. I wasn't going to acquire any debt. I was at a school that has a great TCOM program, and I was close to home. I was in state, like all these things. It was like, if I finish this, like I'm set to start something of, work at some agency and be their videographer,
Mm.
whatever it was. And I was having these thoughts about dropping school, and I just remember, calling my dad, and my dad calling me and being like, please just like make it to the end of the year, like please just like don't make any decision until you finish the year at least. And I dropped out in the middle of February from second semester. So there was a lot of pushback, and I think that it has been hard for my parents, but also me, my parents, to understand like that this is a career, and it is something that you can create for yourself without handing over a degree and a resume and having a job interview like our parents' generation and our parents' generation has done. Um, and for me, that's a lot of like imposter syndrome, right? Of like, I'm making money now and I get to hang out at home most days and edit or do business emails. And some days I'm on set with a camera
Mm.
and I'm getting paid for
Yeah.
it. And it doesn't feel like I should be,
Yeah.
because I didn't, pay my dues, I guess, in life through school or whatever. And so it feels like, do I really deserve this? And I think that's just a lot of ingrained generational experience through, how our parents got jobs and how their education was. Um, so it was really tough for them to accept that I can make a good living through not even going through school. And it was tough for me to accept that too. Even when bigger jobs started happening, I didn't feel like I deserved it, or it was right for me to take these jobs, or like I was the one that should be doing them. So yeah, no, my parents definitely had a major influence in those early stages of, you know, cautioning me. But eventually, it also kind of gave me a bit of a drive to not prove them wrong, but to be able to show them like, hey, I can do this. And it was never like a out of spite thing, but it was like a just wait, just let's see what I can do, and I'll give you the proof.
Yeah. I think it's dope too in my mind. Like you took the torch from your dad and you were carrying on his dream. And I think that's when you were talking to me about it, I was like, this is like that's all cause for a movie within itself. Like it's such a cool story. You actually just reminded me as you were talking. I don't know if you know who Marcus Haney is.
Mm-mm.
He's a filmmaker. One of my I kind of got into filmmaking and I got interested in it because of him. And I watched it in high school. They actually took down his film because
Mm.
I think he was inspiring too many people to sneak into Coachella and all these big venues. But he has a really famous documentary that is now hidden, but it's called No Cameras Allowed. And
Mm.
he goes over and documents all of his, sneaking into these music festivals and him loving film and him not really loving school. And he was at USC in California.
Yeah.
And it was such an interesting, like I'm seeing such an interesting connection because he literally just had to be home for the last final exams and he
Mm.
would have finished school. And
Yeah.
instead he went on a tour with like Mumford and Sons and dropped out of school with like just
Yeah.
literally like a week left. And I think
Yeah.
there's a beauty to that because there is this societal constraint on no, like you have to go to school. You need to get these, you need to get these 4 years underneath your belt so you can get a good job. But I mean, we've kind of seen that's not true. I mean, so many people are in
Totally.
really deep debt and then you don't really utilize your major. And I'm not saying that everyone doesn't and they don't get benefit, but you see a majority kind of get screwed. And I think there's a beauty to people like you kind of laying down this path of, hey, you don't need to go to school to be successful.
Mm.
You don't need to be a graduate of some, college to have good, really good in-depth knowledge on something. And so I feel like you're laying this beautiful foundation for people to actually recognize like, hey, if I'm passionate about something, let's say on the creative side, like I can work and grind maybe for free like you did to really get, experience underneath your belt. And then boom, like you can create your own company and you don't have to go into debt. Thankfully, you had a really good situation to where it was paid for you. But what you were losing was almost more valuable, which was your time. And you finally were just like, I'm good. Like I don't want to do this anymore. I think that's a beautiful
Yeah.
story. I'll have to show you that documentary. You have to like ask him. You have
Yeah.
to
No, I'd
DM
love
him.
to.
Yeah, it's cool.
Well,
But I think
there's like a parallel there of like I didn't technically drop school.
mm.
I just didn't re-enroll. So so I stayed at Ball State through second semester.
uh-huh.
I just stopped doing all my classwork starting February. So, I had professors emailing me like, "Hey, are you okay? Like, what's going on?"
Mm,
And I never like officially, sent in like I'm dropping school kind of letter or anything. It's just I never re-enrolled.
mm,
And whether that was laziness on my part, I don't know. But what I tell myself, at least, is that um, I I didn't want a safety net
mm,
because people, if you are somebody that ends up dropping school, you will hear quite often like, "Oh, you can always go back." You'll hear that over and over. It's like you can always go back if you need to. And while I still could technically go back, I'll go back with like a 1.0 GPA, and I'll be kind of in the shitter.
yeah.
It'll be extra tough to go back. And so rather than just dropping it clean when I still had a good GPA and a good record there, I just let everything crumble. So that net of like, oh, I could go back, that back of my head voice isn't there.
Mm,
Because if I did go back now, like I'd be in deep trouble. Like it'd be rough to
yeah.
to get back into the ecosystem there.
Yeah.
Um, so that was an intentional move of wanting to rip out that safety net for me, of wanting to not give myself that plan B. And to me, plan B is if the video thing for whatever reason crumbles and doesn't work. I'm also trying to start other businesses related in the creative field. And if those don't work either, I think I'll hopefully then have enough business acumen under my belt that I can pivot and go a different direction and be able to be okay.
Yeah. So similar to Jim Carrey, we'll say, and Marcus Haney, do you have people like that within maybe your industry or someone that you've seen that has kind of inspired you to kind of take that leap
In terms of dropping out of school,
in terms of dropping out and, going after what you were actually passionate about instead of, wasting your time?
yeah, I think when you talked earlier about me kind of laying down a pathway, showing people that, it is possible to make a living after dropping school and doing something creative, that's traditionally pretty unstable and highly volatile. I think that there's enough of that path laid, maybe like out in LA or New York or bigger creative markets, but it's something that I personally haven't really seen in a small market like here in Indianapolis. Where the creative space, at least in indie, is very much just now starting to bloom a little bit as people, leave LA and move towards the Midwest or to Texas or Atlanta, wherever. Um, so as much as I wish that I could say that I have like somebody that I look up to that's kind of followed this same type of path, that really hasn't existed for me. And I think a lot of that of why I enjoy it being that way is that I do want to be um, someone at the forefront of that journey, and I am fine making the mistakes um, because I'll be the biggest one to benefit from them. Like I gain the most from making the biggest mistakes first because I learn the most, and being able to lay that pathway out for somebody else is super important to me. So, eventually alongside with all the production company stuff and actual advertising is that, 5-10 years down the line, whatever, I do want to turn around and take some of my experience and turn it into an educational platform to be able to foster other creatives that are either in those big markets or around here to have a way to do this thing. Because I think a lot of people come in with this starving artist mindset, and if you are in that space, a great resource, maybe this will be my inspiration. It's a channel called The Future, spelled Futur, on YouTube, and it's run by a guy named Chris Do, who he went through school and everything, but he is a great resource for how to turn your art, your creative passion into an actual like profitable business. And so many people that drop out or go through school and then are kind of stuck on how to move forward into creative space are just approaching it from kind of the wrong angle of like, oh, I love doing this work, so I would do it for free if I really wanted to. So then you assume that other people think the same, that they're like, oh, because they love doing it, that we can get it for super cheap or for free. And the truth is that your time is valuable and your expertise is valuable and your gear is valuable and all these things that get you really amped up because it's something you love to do, still should cost money. And there's all this other like side of the business that so many people don't focus on, in that, if you have a passion that you're considering like dropping school for or just going a different route than is traditional, that's great. But, and there's the big but caveat there, it's that you can't just have a passion and expect for it to all pan out. Um, you have to have a passion and the desire to learn and grow on the business side of things, because that's what you become. You become a business owner. You're running like a company. It's not just have the camera and that's the fun thing I'm doing. It becomes a whole separate beast, and it's great to have that passion. But unless you have like the willingness to learn, that's really all it is. It's not like you have to bust your butt and like have sleepless nights, and those happen. But it's not this like crazy grind hustle culture that some people crack it up to be. It can be, but it's really just the willingness to learn and to get flexible beyond the passion you have, but learn how to make your passion something bigger than it is.
So it's interesting for me to look at these things when it comes to people, let's say outside of filmmaking, because I feel like filmmaking is a pretty, I'm not gonna say it's easy, but like you can just reach out for your work and go, hey, like I can make a promotional video for you. And I feel like it's a pretty good doorway into a business,
Yeah.
especially now that like social media is so big. But I
Hmm.
actually got to see this really interesting off branch, and this is actually talking about my sister, but having the like, do people want to buy this art of mine? Would people be interested? Do I feel like I'm stealing from them to put a price on my art? And I think that point is like that you brought up is so important to a lot of these artists too that aren't just in filmmaking, even photography. It's like, hey, like people can't paint what you paint. That is the skill. And so I think that is a beautiful translation to so many other creative jobs is like, hey, like, and I told her this, I was like, I can't paint what you paint. So I would have to buy it unless you gave it to me for free, but then you're in trouble. And so being able to actually, show people that and showcase that is now the actual job. It's not
Right.
necessarily creating the work. And that was kind of one of the questions I had for you was, now that social media is so big, almost everyone has to be a filmmaker. Like I feel like everyone really has to be a filmmaker in some way or another. We just have our iPhones to do it. What would be your tips if someone was trying to market themselves on, let's say, Instagram the best way possible? Would it be to utilize your iPhone, just utilize the things that you have? Should they buy certain lighting things? What would be the first things? What's the lowest hanging fruit that they can kind of start to grab at?
Yeah. I think there's two elements to that, and there's the like theory answer, and then there's like the practical advice on what to buy and the gear and all that. But first, the theory answer with social media is that comparison truly is the thief of joy.
Mm,
And with social media being a creative dominated space, there's plenty of other like educational content of whatever sorts, but it is a creative dominated space, whether you're on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, whatever, that you are now opened up to a complete platform of the people that are on the lowest end of that spectrum and the highest. And you can see them both simultaneously at any point you ever want. And so, um, like with your sister, with I can't paint what she paints, if you're in that position, you understand that, but also you look to the person that's 10 times higher than you and think,
mm,
well, I can't paint what they paint, and they're selling their stuff. So why wouldn't someone just go to them first? Especially if you do have to charge a certain amount to like make a living and support yourself. So it's like, why wouldn't someone just go to the best of the best?
mm,
And it just becomes this whole mind game of, if I'm not the absolute best, then how can I even charge and get started in any of that? And it's kind of a heartbreaking mental battle that you go through from the day you get started to the day you retire and die. I think like I'm still struggling with that now. It's like there are other companies here that I look up to, and it's like, why would someone go with me rather than somebody else?
mm.
Um, and that's something that's unique to each person that you have to figure out. And it's an answer that will be in flux that you maybe don't know right away, but it's something that will come to you, and something that will reveal itself to you, and that's really your unique market proposition. Um,
Yeah.
so on that theoretical side of like, okay, how do I even deal with the comparison of social media? Uh, I don't have the answer, because it's something that I struggle with daily, and
Yeah.
something that I'm still working through. Um, but really, the biggest thing is like, just again, what I said earlier is that done is better than perfect.
Mm,
Getting stuff out there and getting both the feedback loop of seeing your product um, over again through fresh eyes of watching something a week after you finished it and put it out there, but also getting feedback from people, sending it to other trusted creatives and getting their honest feedback. All of that's super valuable, and whether or not you like directly implement things people say, you are subconsciously building out your taste. And
mm,
so I think a lot of like the creative career journey looks something like, your skills are here and your taste is here, and you're just kind of going like this all throughout life, where your taste is always a little bit higher than what you're able to do, and there'll be
mm,
some times where you're able to do more than what your taste is. You just need the project to do it. And so it's just constantly like two lines that are moving alongside each other, that's what makes it fun. And being able to just relax and enjoy that process and be okay with it is probably the biggest thing to mentally prepare yourself for. On a tangible and practical side, as a filmmaker, um, the first thing I'll say is that cameras themselves, nearly every digital sensor nowadays can get 90% of the exact same product.
Mm,
So if you buy a $1,000 Sony a6400, you can get 90% of the way to an Alexa Mini. That's a $50,000 camera. And
yeah.
that might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but the principles of what get you there are what's way more important than the gear that is a part of
Mm,
that. So, um, really investing in the education, if you don't go through school, like investing in like good books about cinematography and lighting, and really investing in relationships of trying to curate a sphere around you of like-minded individuals that are pursuing a higher taste and a higher result collectively with you are the things that will have 100 times more ROI than buying the next camera.
mm,
The first camera that I shot on and had client projects with was that Sony A6400, and I think I got it used on eBay for like $800.
mm,
Um, and an iPhone is more than that. So the camera in the iPhone can do say 70% of what the top cameras can do, but that 70% is still enough to get you going, and it's enough to get you in a sphere of other people that think like you and are pursuing the same goals as you, and can elevate your work more than the next purchase can. So really, I think it's investing in the education of whether that's courses or books or just like really diving in on YouTube. But really, the biggest thing for me has been just people. Has
mm,
been like making friends that are in the industry and keeping up on those relationships and doing favors for people and then asking for favors from people. And that's a hard part because sometimes you feel like you don't deserve to ask favors. But I find in this space that's so collaboratively driven, you know, you can make stuff by yourself, but the best stuff is made with other people. That most people are willing to extend favors and asking for them, although you feel like maybe that's hard for me. Um, like it's a ding on you. Like, oh, if I'm asking somebody for a favor that they think that I don't think they're worth enough. Usually that's not the case, and that most people are more than willing to help out on something if you have a good idea or they feel like they can elevate that creative product. So surrounding yourself with people and education would be the first things before getting any camera,
mm.
in my opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting too because when I look at a lot of these people that are kind of popping off, even though ones that are fairly niche, it's it's all just done on the iPhone. And
Hmm.
I feel like people kind of maybe hold themselves back because of that to the point where, well, I don't want to post. I just have this iPhone, and it's just not going to be that good. But what they do need to recognize is it's primarily about the content first. Like content is king, and I feel like Casey Neistat is a perfect example of that. Like I feel like all the time he's using kind of we'll call them lesser cameras that could be, he has plenty of money to utilize higher quality cameras, but he doesn't care about that because it's about his pacing. It's about the story that he's telling. It's not
Yeah,
about if he's using an iPhone or a GoPro or like an older Canon. He doesn't really care. And
yeah,
so, I mean, to your point, it's like sometimes you just need to do your project for like just post the first video, and then that ball will start rolling, and then your ideas will flow from there instead of just kind of sitting there going, I have so many options for cameras and lighting, and
right.
it's not about the things, it's about what you like, the story or the message you're trying to portray.
Yeah, and maybe that's getting like specific on uh like the inner workings of my industry. But that really is up to like, are you trying to become a content creator or a one-man band, or are
Mm,
you going into like the more film commercial corporate route where you are working with people on set? And both ways are viable and you can do both.
yeah.
But I think kind of knowing that from the outset is super valuable, because you're absolutely right. If you're in that content creatory side of world, content reigns above literally everything else. If you have decent audio, like people can listen to it, your camera can be a potato, and if you got good content, like it'll go viral and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Like the content's what really matters there, and the content matters on like the film production side too. Um, but the people around you are
Mm,
what I think matters even more than the
yeah.
content. Um, just building relationships and getting recommended around and working your way up through as like a production assistant on a set, and that's very specific to the actual like commercial production world. But those people are what will elevate you and what will elevate the content itself too.
Yeah. And I also think that I think people kind of build this up into their head like, oh, well, I need 1 million followers to do what I want, to make the money that I want. But
Mm-hmm.
maybe you can kind of touch into that, but it's just kind of picking into your own niche, and it's,
Yeah,
being bigger there. But even it's like relative, because you don't need 1 million people, tens of thousands of people to follow
yeah,
you to have like a thriving business.
yeah. There's a principle called like the 1,000 true fans.
Mm,
If you have a following of 1,000 people on Instagram, or say 10,000 or whatever, all you truly need to build a sustainable and scalable business is roughly 1,000 true fans. And these true
mm,
fans are people that, one, will regularly engage with your content, whether that's liking, commenting, sharing, whatever. Um, two, would buy from you, whether a product that you're selling, say you're a content creator and you don't make any money off of ad revenue on YouTube, but you sell a $10 LUT pack on your link tree on Instagram. That's a scalable and totally viable way of generating revenue. And
mm,
so a $10 LUT pack, like, dude, so many people would buy that. I've dropped like a couple $100 on power grades for DaVinci. And my girlfriend who's a photographer will buy presets. It's very common for people that are doing this professionally to invest in digital assets. And so if you have 1,000 true fans that really love your work, love who you are as a person, because your personal brand is more than just the content you put out, it's who you are. If you have 1,000 people that love all of these aspects of you and would buy from you, you take 1,000 times a $10 sale and now you've made 10 grand.
yeah.
And that's scalable to $20. Now you have a $20 product, you've doubled it. It's not always about looking for the biggest clients or people that will buy multiple $100 products, but just having 1,000 true fan people to get your feet wet and get the business going is all you really need to scale.
Yeah, it's kind of funny too, because you'd think that you're like, oh, I need this like, $1,000 product, or I need this multi-$100 product. Let's just say
Uh-huh.
in the realm of, painting a photo, or painting something beautiful. Let's say, like that could just be $5 bought a couple hundred times. That could be a $5 product bought a couple thousand times, and
Mm-hmm.
like that could be your job. And I feel like it's hard for people to kind of like pull that out of their brain as something conceptually possible. And it's just
Yeah.
like, it's that first step that you did. At some point you just have to like muster up something to go, well, first I'm going to do it like you did. I'm going to do it for free. And then you have the confidence to go, no, like this is valuable, this is worth something.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna give this a touch. And so like you are the essence of an entrepreneur itself. What's like a good entrepreneurial like frame of mind, or what would be some like keys that people could kind of step into that frame of mind to convince themselves I can do this.
Yeah, I think, speaking purely from the creative space, it's that most people don't approach it from an entrepreneurial uh, angle,
Mm,
from not a business angle. It's from the artist angle. And so if you're thinking of it from a business angle, you already have a head start. Before anything happens, if you're approaching it like a business from the get-go and not just like, I'm coming out here and making art and hopefully getting paid for it. If you're already in that frame of mind to begin with, you have a step ahead.
mm,
Um, so beyond that, uh, for me, it's really been a journey of trying to figure out how to adjust how I process things, and bring in new clients and the workflow to be something that's actually scalable. I just got engaged. I'm getting married next year, and then however many years down the line after that, I'll have kids and a family, and some of the mindset has to shift of like, how do I sell just me to how do I sell a company? How
Mhm.
do I, sell a full service rather than just here's your video? Um, so just having those like internal conversations and thoughts will already put you a step ahead, and to get tangible with it, um, making sure that you're charging like some sort of healthy profit margin. Most agencies charge somewhere between 10 and 25% on top of their labor rates, will put you in a great spot to scale things. So,
Mhm.
if you think like I should come out and shoot for $500 a day, you put that as your labor rate, and then you charge 10 to 25% on top of that as the company making money. So having
Mhm.
just some sort of like business acumen knowledge, and these are all things that you learn over time, but implementing those will put you in a good space as an entrepreneur to grow. And again, like I said earlier, just making sure that you're approaching this with the mindset of I'm ready to learn and to grow and be flexible, and um, not approach it just from like a starving artist perspective, but from I'm a business person, an
Mhm.
entrepreneur. If you just internalize that sort of identity, then I think for most people that you're able to build $100,000 business at least. I think anybody can build $100,000 business with the right mindset to begin with and with enough time.
Yeah, I think and I've run into this issue before too, and I mean, you've clearly tapped on it a couple times, but the it's hard to price something, right? Like, you make a product and you're sitting there, you're like, "Well, how much do I feel like I'm worth?" And that's like a really hard question. Like, you're digging
Yeah,
deep. You're like, how much do I deserve? And
yeah,
first you run into that imposter syndrome. You're like, well, I just, it doesn't make sense. Why should they pay me this much, or why
hmm,
should I be asking for this price? And I think that's interconnected everywhere within athletics,
hmm,
business, any type of business, and being able to convince yourself that you are worth what your asking price
hmm.
is one, incredibly important, not just for your business, obviously, but for yourself, to prove to yourself that, hey, I am worth this. What was that journey like for you?
Yeah. It was a tough one.
Yeah.
When you start out doing work for free, which I think everybody should at some point, just to get your foot in the door and learn how to talk to clients, even though they're not paying at that point, but learn how to talk to people in a
Mm,
professional business way. Being able to deliver on the promises that you set out. So in the video production world, I kind of view it as like different tiers of work, and so I think every time that you get a new client through the door, that you should be raising your rates in some way, and eventually that will stabilize. But you will know when it's time to stabilize. You don't just want to infinitely inflate prices forever. But at that point, that it's time to stabilize, you will have had enough industry experience to understand like this is kind of the market rate. But you start out doing it for free, and then you charge $250 to shoot a wedding, and then you charge $500 for a brand video for a car detailing place. And it just you slowly kind of stack $50, $100 on until you then have enough experience to know like where that price is. Um, I wouldn't come into it trying to like look at the market rates and then just immediately charging that, because you don't have enough experience yet, and you gain experience a lot more quickly than you might think. And so really it's more about the internal battle of um, am I able to catch up my like thought process and my mindset of like what my value is to where I am in the market. And so for a
yeah.
while it was like I would find myself stuck in tiers. So one tier being like $500 to $1,000 for a video. I would be scared to quote anything beyond 1,000. And
Yep.
then that next tier is like 1,000 to 2,500, and then 2,500 to 5 grand, then 5 to 10, and then it goes on from there. And all these like brackets that it becomes literally just like mental warfare to
Yeah.
jump to the next one. And it's not because you're not worth it. It's purely an internal thing of like how do I show that value to somebody? And kind of the biggest thing going into like sales calls or talking to new clients that has helped me out is if you're on the phone with them, they're already interested,
Mm,
and you don't need to get on there and try to sell yourself until you're on your knees begging for work. And so there will be times, and I think it's the risk that anybody takes going down the entrepreneurial path, especially an artistic, creative entrepreneurial path. There will be times that you don't have work and that you're scared if you'll be able to pay rent the next month. And those times will happen, and they have happened for me. And by some miracle, it feels like almost every time just enough comes through the door at the exact time that it's needed.
mm,
Um, and so, if you believe in God or not, to me, that's a God providing thing.
mm,
Um, and every time that I've been fearful and scared of if I'll get another job and if I'll have to move out of my apartment or sell off all my things, every time that I've been, at my most stressed, staying up all night wondering, something has come through. And that's all by the grace of God for me.
mm.
Um, so I kind of got off my train of thought there, but
Yeah. Well,
essentially, go ahead.
well, I was gonna say that, but it's a really beautiful piece that I've actually seen interconnected within quite a lot as of recently too. I had Laura Wilkinson on, who is an Olympic champion,
Mm,
won world championships, World Cups. She's a beast of an athlete, and she kind of spoke similarly in that aspect of when she's on
mm,
10 meter, it almost feels spiritual. Like there is some sort of being able to have something, um, something like that behind you spiritually is incredibly important. And you see that and this is why I like the performance playbook, right? Like everything we do is in a sense of performance. And it's
yeah,
not the, most pretty way to put it, but being able to utilize that spiritual side and be able to release control elsewhere is actually super important. And I can only imagine when it comes to the creative side, that might be the most important part for you, is actually to funnel that through some sort of spiritual, like,
yeah,
love and admiration.
yeah. Because people will tell you like you get on these calls and you don't want to be begging for work, right? You want to leave it up to them, and if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. If they're on the call with you, they're already interested.
Mm,
And learning about like how to structure your budget questions and things like that, answer rebuttals are all very important, and not something that I think we can really dive into today. But again, the future that I mentioned earlier is a great resource
yeah,
for that.
yeah,
Um, but you don't want to try to justify your prices all the time, and so you have to be okay with a no. And eventually, enough no's will turn into at least one yes. And then, as soon as you get one yes that's in that next bracket, it's like, okay, you're in that next bracket, you're ready to move up. And it really is just like a one new lead at a time, one new client at a time, trying to move up brackets. And usually by the time that I'm actually able to make one of those jumps, I've garnered enough experience to where I feel like staying in that bracket is like robbery for myself. Like I'm selling myself short. And for me, I found that by the time I actually make a jump to a new pricing bracket, I've been ready to do that for months and months. And it's just waiting for that one yes that exists in that world. And then, that person does, or you do a job for them, and then word of mouth there spreads. They're talking to their people that can also spend that much. And really, as long as you deliver a good product and are, a great person to work with and deliver on your promises, like there's no reason that the word of mouth won't work for you. Because people want to share good things with people. They want to
yeah,
share like, oh, I worked with this guy and he was great. Or, if you don't deliver, it's like, oh, I worked with this guy and he wasn't. So maybe, either don't work with him or he's not worth as much as I paid. So just being able to deliver on what you say is hugely important. And just being able to take some no's, even when you're scared about rent next month. Um, there's always something that I think will provide.
yeah, yeah. I do think that's such an interesting position too. Is because there's that big fear. What am I worth? that
Mhm.
much money. And then again, the next fear is actually putting that to the test. And well, let me have this conversation with this person that I'm interested in working with. And then you run into this internal battle of like, that imposter syndrome. Like, do I
Mhm.
feel like I'm stealing from this person, or do I feel like I'm
Yeah.
providing the value for this price?
Yeah.
And I think that's such a beautiful way of putting it, is like, by the time you finally got that one yes for the next bracket, it had been time for quite a bit, but you
Yeah.
almost had to, like, there had to be that positive reinforcement, and like,
Totally.
your work had to speak for itself, and it eventually
Mhm.
does. And that's
Yeah.
that's fantastic. I love that
Mm.
roundabout circle of, the work, because it is the work. You have to put in the work to get that outcome, and if you don't, then it's probably not going to happen as much as you hope for it to.
Yeah, and that work is not always just the output in terms of the product slash video slash photo slash website or design or whatever you
Mm,
put out. The work doesn't actually necessarily have to mean the work product, but it's the work of like developing yourself as a human being
mhm,
and being better with clients, being better with the people you're interviewing. It's all these things that raise your value as a person, that I think has a much greater return and speaks volumes about your business more than the exact product that you're putting out.
yeah, I love that. Well, hey, it was a fantastic conversation, and I enjoyed every second of it. And I think a lot of people, including myself, has learned a lot from this. And I we're building you. At least I am into this Marcus Haney, Jim Carrey situation. But um, for the people that are interested in your work, or want to find you and maybe reach out to you, where's the best place to do that?
Yeah, if it's for production specifically, our Instagram handle is paragon.productions, and then website is paragonproductions.co, co, not .com. The .com is taken by a 15-year-old company that hasn't done anything in 15 years, which sucks. But personally, I'm always open to have any sort of phone call, conversation, FaceTime, whatever. Like I love sharing my experience, and that Instagram handle is at jack.linderman, Linderman. Yeah, that's probably the best place, and I'm always happy to give up my phone number for any personal calls. So
Beautiful. And for people that are watching this channel, be excited for the film that we are working on together, because
yes,
I'm quite excited for that. And then you'll be able to see his work at play. So, Jack, thank you for your time. And I
thank
know
you,
we'll
Brandon.
be
It's been fun.
we'll be talking again soon.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks, man.
All right, brother. Have a good day.